Hey everyone, welcome to the Smiling Homeschooler podcast. We're glad you can join us. Before we begin, we just want to say thank you to Teaching Textbooks for helping make the Smiling Homeschooler possible. They're an amazing math curriculum and just an amazing company. Our family uses them and we love them. So if you haven't checked them out, or if you're just not enjoying the curriculum you're using so far this year, it's not too late to check them out over at teachingtextbooks.com. Also, thank you to Samaritan Ministries. They are a community of Christians who help pay one another's medical bills. They make it possible for families to take a step of faith, whether it's a career change or a ministry opportunity or in bringing mom home. And you can learn more and support us through the link in the show notes or in the comments. But all right, let's get going. Here's my dad.
Well, hey, everybody. We're going to try to keep this short because I'm sick. And I feel like we've said this like for 6 weeks in a row. And that's because we're always sick. I know at Ben's house, they're sick. And it just feels like it goes from one person to one person. I know we're watching Ben's brother's daughter tonight. And I looked over and my wife goes, I bet she's sick, like she's getting sick. And it's just yeah, like a canary in the cave mine, they start to drop. So, but it's been a full week here. We had snow. We didn't have as much as our kids would have liked, but it was still probably 7 to 10 inches somewhere in there. It's thick out there, and it's been super cold. And we've had a birthday, and Ben went trampolining, and ...
Sprained my ankle and got hurt. So my friend was like, be careful, don't get hurt. And I did. I was just jumping, and all of a sudden it just went, and I was like, oh no, I hurt it bad. And I hobble off, and it was in the first 30 minutes. So I just laid there for the next hour and a half. And those employees there, literally there was a guy, because I was like laying on this one area where it's like a narrow walkway, and where they have like the trapeze thing, and so they didn't have a lot of employees, but so they were kind of like rotating, and this guy had to walk. I bet there was a foot between me and the wall, and he like just walks around me. I'm laying stretched out, never said a word. No one ever said a word, to me, like, hey, are you okay, or anything like that. Like none of the employees checked on you. They're just like, well, I guess he's okay,
Obviously have never read the story in the Bible of the Good Samaritan.
That's true. Now they do have signs everywhere that say you're completely at your own risk, and you sign waivers, so I totally get it. So yeah, we ended up going to like an ortho med stat kind of deal, which they were great, and it wasn't broken, just a bad sprain, or I don't know if it was a bad one, but it was big and swollen and painful. But honestly, not that bad pain wise. So, but then Rissa got sick that night. So the last 3 days I've been home, clomping around, slowly, just hobbling. So but it's gotten better, a little bit better today. So,
and then and he's also had car problems. So he's been trying to fix his car, and has had our car, and then taking the battery out of our car to fix his car, and didn't fix it, and it didn't work. And then Maggie started her new job at a coffee shop in our little town, and when I went over and bought something for Rissa, I think the mom had me go, and it looked fun, and everybody was hopping. And then by the end of the day, at quitting time, I get a phone call from mom who goes, Maggie just fainted. Are you going with me? And I'm like, yes. And I ran out there. The car's stuck in the driveway, so I'm trying to push it, falling down with my slippery shoes on. We finally get there, and Maggie was fine, and the ambulance was there, and they're like, ah. So it's, but it just feels like it's been ongoing. And, maybe a good lead into today's discussion, because like I said, for the last 3 weeks, we've just been talking about different comments that moms have made over on Facebook of things that they would like, that they've been facing right now. And one of the moms said, we love to be outside when the weather's decent, or we might even say when it's snowy and fun. We found other families that we want to be around a lot. And add that to basketball and church events, music lessons, plays, etc. And we can't find the time for the books. So we don't I don't know if you don't progress or progress very quickly. And this type A mom wants to do all the amazing things and the books. And there were a couple moms who said that. So I thought maybe we could talk about maybe just kind of addressing this mom's idea of, you know, because if I were to maybe try to interpret that, I'd say what she's asking is, you know, I like all this stuff we're doing, but I don't feel like we're getting to the real important stuff, the real learning. And so maybe we can address some of those things. And in fact, I made another post over at Facebook that I was kind of challenged by a mom who had read it because I was just kind of being funny, maybe, or fighting against so much of what experts tell us, or maybe our minds tell us, of what real learning should be measured by. And so I wrote, you know, learning should not be measured by the number of days completed, the number of hours of instruction, completing the lesson and or the curriculum, the ability to regurgitate historical or scientific information, the ability to write a paper with a proper bibliography and correct margins, the letter grade A, getting all the questions right, or all the spelling, or spelling all the words correctly. It's so much more than that. And I guess, you know, I was just kind of being funny and making a point. And Kim Whitman said, now do one on how you would measure learning. And I thought about it for a long time, and it was hard because, and maybe that's, and I'll tell you what I wrote maybe towards the end, but maybe that would be part of our discussion now, because I felt like that mom was kind of struggling with that. You know, she likes all the fun they were having, but somehow inside of her says, we're not doing the learning part. And so how about we start a conversation with that, Ben?
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously there's just the reality of there is X amount of time in the day, so you have only so much time you can fill. So if you're going to do a bunch of other stuff, something else is going to give, you know? So that's just the reality of life. So as much as we want things to be one way or the other, we're going to have to pick and choose. So that's no matter what, you know, if you pick or if you're forced into the choice in terms of, like, let's say you get really sick for a week, that may be the choice for you automatically is, hey, we're not going to progress in the books very much this week. But yeah, I mean, I do think that is legit, because I mean, we always talk about, like, don't worry about this, don't worry about that, you don't have to do this, you know, but it's like, so what is actually learning then? And obviously learning, it's like one of those things where you know it when you see it, but it's
hard to define.
But it's not even necessarily hard to define, but it's hard to define in terms of defining it with the school terms, you know? So, obviously they do it just by saying, can you do these, you know, can you pass these quizzes? Can you pass these tests? And if so, then you're learning. But I mean,
that's an easy way to do it.
Yeah,
I mean, because then you have something, you say, okay, you got a 54. So we can say you didn't get very high on the learning scale. And it's easier to do that than just to talk to a kid who's sitting next to you and go, I think they understand it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, and for me, it would be just as a parent is the same way you do it before you're doing school is, can you see that your child is growing and learning just across life? You know, are they, you know, asking questions? Are they, you know, talking about new things? Are they interested in new things? Are they pursuing stuff that they'll enjoy? You know, all that kind of stuff. It's just, I mean, they're learning constantly.
And that's why I think, I guess I would ask you, and maybe, you know, even as I read that, you know, that it's not a letter, that comment, you kind of felt like she was distinguishing between activities and school. Mm-hmm. You know, like she kind of saw the value of the activities. And I guess the question to me, and I would ask her, so which is better? You know, which one is better? And maybe it's not a right or wrong answer, you know, but I think sometimes we see the benefit in one thing. I mean, like, people will watch, what was not Kratts Creatures, but Wild Kratts on PBS, you know, and they'd say, oh, my kids learn so much about animals. I wish school could be like that. And I'm like, why can't that be school, you know?
Yeah.
And so what's the problem with that? Why do they say that?
I don't think it has to be like one is bad and one is good, or the one's way better. I just think that for some reason people don't think the one counts towards anything when it definitely does. So, because, like, obviously I do think there are just certain scenarios like math. that you're just not gonna really, like, you might use it, but you're not just gonna intuit all of it all by itself, you know? So like you kind of do have to have organized a little bit of like, okay, I'm gonna learn how to spell, I'm gonna learn how to read. You don't just like happen into that often, you know, but the life skills, which are super important, are not going to be in a book really easily. So it's like you really do need both of those things. But I think for some reason the book things are often elevated way above the other stuff, and then the other stuff is just put down to, oh well, it doesn't really count towards anything. And it's like, no, that is unbelievably important. It is
okay, so
how
then
to interact, how to do life, how to do, you know, all that stuff.
Is it legitimate to say then, I mean, I think you're right in saying one is not necessarily better than the other. Is it
you just need
accurate
both.
to say that they're equal, or that they're equal? You know, that we'll say book learning.
I just mean more as, maybe I wouldn't even see one's better than, because I do think if you can have, like, you need your kids to be able to function. Like you can have a kid who's a savant who, you know, can memorize every book they've ever read and whatever, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're like equipped for life super well. So obviously, like, I think doing things in relationship and family is the most important, but I don't think it's like one is exclusive of the other one, you know? So obviously, like, book learning should not be exclusive in the only type of, you know, focus that you have. You know, if you're doing 12 hours a day of reading books and textbooks and studying and doing, you know, homework and all that stuff, then you're missing an enormous part of what, you know, learning really is. And I would say is as important or more so. I don't know if I lost the question in there, but
I was just saying, could we at least say that they're equal? You know, that it's not like if you're doing an activity, if you go to a park, that is somehow less than doing something else.
Exactly.
I'm not saying it's more, but could we say at least that it's equal?
Yeah.
You know, because I mean, and I've said this before, I always felt like my kids learned more when they were not doing school. I mean, honestly, because they were, you know, even when I came over to your house today for 1 minute, you know, Hudson was sitting at the table. I don't even know what he was doing. He might have been building a Lego. He was doing something. And I mean, I would guess from the look on his face, he was accomplishing something. He was learning something. He was doing something. And I'm like, to me, that's every bit as should be counted as learning as,
yes,
you know, whatever, looking at a clock, you know, in a book, and, you know, pointing at the 7 and saying 7 o'clock.
I mean, I would say both of those are important, but yes, I mean, they're
equal.
They're equal. Yes, exactly.
Well, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm not saying one's better.
Yeah.
I'm just saying they're at least equal.
Yeah.
So to the mom who says, you know, when we have a great day, we're just having so much fun doing these other things, I would say, well, it sounds like you're still doing school.
Yeah.
You know,
exactly.
Your kids are still learning. So, you know, it doesn't mean you haven't been doing the important things. You're doing equally as important stuff as the other stuff. Is the other stuff important? I think so. And maybe now I'll kind of just say what I wrote on Facebook. You know, I couldn't figure out how to do that. How do we measure learning? You know, I kind of had things like, you know, maybe it's like, they get it, they can use it, they can explain it to someone else. I've heard that, like, you know, that's how you can tell someone's really learned. Or, you know, learning is incremental. It's a little here and a little there. And then finally, I just kind of landed on, you know, the question comes to me, is there more in the bucket than there was the day before? You know, and if there's even just a little bit more, then you have learned.
Right.
You know, really, it's not learning if there's nothing more in the bucket. And sometimes that happens. You know, if you're asleep, you don't learn anything. But if you're just living life, I think you are learning. And for like math, you know, you don't have to learn everything. You don't have to fill the bucket up. You just have to have a little bit more than you did the day before. So you plug a little bit, you know, and you do things that you don't like because we're learning those things as well. But I'm going back to, because again, there seem to be at least 2 moms who said this, you know, I kind of feel this guilt over that we haven't seen as much progress as I'd like to.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I really think is like is quantifying what is like how do we quantify learning on a person? That's just hard. It's hard to quantify a person's ability like learning into something like that. So I do agree, like just the idea of like how do you turn something that's just them developing as a person and what everyone is learning constantly. Like learning, all that means is you're gaining new information, knowledge, skills, whatever, and like turn that into a quantifiable, test, which is why they do tests. That it's not a good judge of who that person is. So it is tough to do 100%. But
and I don't think we should do it. I mean, I know some states have to, and you have to do those kind of things. But and again, when we first started homeschooling, that was my grid. And I used to say to Mom, why aren't the kids doing tests? And she'd say, I'm sitting right next to them. I know how they're doing. I know if they're getting it. Why do I need to have to give them a test on how they? And I thought that was so smart at the time. Yeah. But I think she was right. And I think there is some kind of, whatever that we have to tell ourselves that, hey, my kids are still learning, even though we didn't open that book today. It doesn't mean that book's not important. It just means I don't have to feel guilty because we didn't. We accomplished as much as when the book was open.
Yeah. But real quick here, we do want to say thanks to Teaching Textbooks. In a time like I'm mentioning with sickness and, injuries or whatever else you've got going on in life, sometimes it's just really nice to have an independent math curriculum that your kid can just do on their own. They can jump on from any device that has an internet browser, go through their math problems, go through the new, lecture, everything else. It's super interactive. It's super engaging. My daughter loves it. And I think your kids will too if they haven't already tried it out. Go check them out, teachingtextbooks.com. We really appreciate their support.
And we want to thank Redeem Health Share by Samaritan Ministries for making today's show possible. If you're like others I've talked to, maybe the changes in the Affordable Care Act have you worried. Can I encourage you to check out Redeem Health Share? It's Christians helping other Christians with their healthcare needs, and I think they might be the solution to your concerns. They have multiple programs and options to fit the budget and season of the life that you're in. We've been members for over 15 years and couldn't be happier. You can learn more about Redeem Health Share in the show notes below.
I do think the overall big question, as everyone always has, is the finishing the book. And I get it. Like that is a very, we talk about quantifying, that feels like a quantifying thing where like, oh man, I only made it 60% through the book. I have 60%, I'm 40% behind. My child is 40% behind. And I just do not think it is that 1-to-1, I mean, there's so much review, it's slowly building. A lot of times each year is focused on a couple major kind of, topics. It's not like every single day is something drastically new that they're not going to know, how to, read because of it or something like that. So, I mean, I think that, that it unfortunately does just put such a huge burden on so many people that, well, the book has this many pages, so that's exactly how much I should be doing. When in reality, it's not as cut and dry as that, and there are so many curriculums. They all do it differently. There's so many different ways of, teaching it. You're going to be okay. You don't have to get to the exact last page or else you're behind. That's just not, and schools do that. It just doesn't always work out to just be perfectly close the book at the last day of school and you're done. And that's okay. And I think any mom who's done it for a while understands that, but it's still totally, it's a strong pull. I mean, you hear that a lot.
And I would like to, maybe I'd be a little harsher and even, want to grab you and shake you by the shoulders and say, wake up, Mom. Because I went to one of those curriculum companies where, they had different subjects in different parts of the building. And I walk into a room that holds maybe 4 or 5 cubicles, maybe a few more than that. And at each desk, there's someone working on a textbook. And I know how they begin this. They begin with this book and they go, okay, you have 180 lessons to complete. And so this person sits down and they make an outline and they write 180 different things, and they fill in all that information. That person sitting behind that computer is just typing away, thinking of creative things to teach and do. I'm not saying they're not good teachers, but it's so arbitrary. That is not how we qualify learning, And again, I think it's okay to think about, what are things that we need to cover. And, everybody thinks, will say to me, oh, Todd, you don't care about math. And I'm like, that's not true. I know math is important. Not everything. You get to decide as a mom what you think is important for. We decided for our kids that geometry was not important, and so we said, okay, our kids don't have to learn geometry. I remember Catherine wanted to, but I told her, hey, if at any point you don't want to do it, that's okay with me. It's okay with us. But we said they had to learn, a lot of that basic math because we knew that'd come in handy later.
And I think also, it's okay if things change over time too, Mom and Dad didn't do that initially. Like I did do geometry, Sam did geometry, Kat apparently did it as well. I don't know about Ike and Abe and all them, so some of that, it doesn't just always happen immediately. I do think that there is like a freeing as time goes on to understand like, hey, some of these things, I don't have to go with the system. And that is honestly like, I get it. It's so tough. Like the system of what it looks like is so ingrained now at this point for so long of this is what progression in life looks like that we really can't think outside the box very easily. Like it is really tough to not apply that, but whatever, 100+ years ago, that just wasn't even a thing, but this has just become so how you do it that it really is so tough. It's so tough to not think of it in terms of that. But that is not some like law of nature. It's not like, if I go and, steal something from my neighbor, that's wrong. This is not like that. It's just something that society, our culture has said is right. And so then we think it is, but it's not, it's not the way it has to be. I'm not saying, there are laws, there are things like that, but a lot of them, it's about the spirit of do 180 days. You get to determine that. You take the test. Some states require testing. I get that. My biggest thing is move to a good state. I know it's a ton to ask, but we just had someone message recently who just said, I came from like, I don't remember if it was like Pennsylvania or something like that, which is a harder one.
Yeah, it was.
Or New York or something like that, and just moved to Indiana or somewhere close by. And she's like, "Oh my goodness, it is such a game changer. It's unbelievable."
Yeah.
So I go, it's tough. I totally get it's tough in some states, but I don't know.
And I would say, Mom, you've already taken a step of faith and started living outside the box when you began to homeschool. Can I encourage you maybe to step a little more outside the box? And, if you honestly think that learning is measured by completing 180 days, then that's okay. But I'm going to guess that is not true.
Right.
That's my wife when we were newly married, and I'd say, are you hungry? And she'd hold up her hand and start counting her fingers. And I'm like, what are you doing? She goes, well, I was just saying we ate lunch at 11:30 or 12:30. So I'm just counting, and I'm like, what does that have to do with if you're hungry or not? I'm like, do you feel anything that says you're hungry? And she was going by how many hours it had been. Now that may be a good practice or not. I'm not saying that, but it doesn't answer the question. And I think, all these days that we, or the time that we spend, or finishing a curriculum is not a measure of learning. There can be nothing else in the bucket, at the end of a year by doing all those things. Again, all I want my kids to do is I want them to know a little bit more than maybe they did the day before. It doesn't mean they're going to retain everything they learned, but maybe just a little bit of it will stick. Or maybe as they play and they're playing with Lego, they learn something that fills up the bucket just a little bit more. And the truth is, your kids, your 8-year-old is going to know a lot more when he's 9 than he did when he's 8. I mean, you don't even have to worry about that. And the same applies to a 15-year-old. They know a lot more than when they're 17 than when they were 15. I'm going to tell you, it works that way every single time.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I was going to say, and if you're pushing, just if the end of the book is all that matters, then, you talk about retention is going to drop out so much. I mean, anytime you're just cramming to try to get something done for the sake of completion, you're not going to remember it. I mean, everyone remembers, back in college or high school or wherever, or whatever you had to do where you were like, oh, I gotta remember this, the night before or 2 days before. You're just memorizing it. It's not, you're just completing it for the sake of completing it. You do not care at that point generally. So if completion is all that matters, I think actually you will learn less because of that than if your goal is to, let's just learn as we go, through the school year. We're going to just naturally start to learn more as we go. I think that's way more effective long term.
Well, hey, I think that's a great place to end. And again, to answer that lady's question, that mom's question, who said, so how do we get into that? I'd say keep enjoying the time you're in right now. If you got a lot on in basketball and church and events and music lessons, plays, that's all part of learning. It sounds like your kids are learning a lot. When you can fit the books in, plug away at that, but it's all the same. We're excited about next week. We have two special guests from the old school. Sorry, Gina Suarez and Deborah Wooler, founder and chief editor in chief. And I think it's going to be a great conversation. I think you're going to be encouraged because they're doing a lot of exciting things over there, and they've had some changes. They've been around for a long time. Part of the homeschool movement, modern homeschool day, part of the modern day homeschool movement. So have a great week. Have a great weekend. If you have some snow, still have some deep snow, when it gets a little bit warmer, make sure you go out with the kids and play just for a little bit and enjoy these days, or maybe as the snow makes the days a little bit snugglier, as my granddaughter Addie said, hot chocolate is perfect after being outside on a snowy day. And you know what? When you do that, there's no way you can't smile.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us and for being here. We really appreciate you. Again, thank you to Teaching Textbooks for making what we do possible. Go support them and tell them that we sent you over at teachingtextbooks.com. And thank you to Samaritan Ministries, a community of Christians that pay one another's medical bills, helping families take a safe step of faith as they feel God's leading in career or in ministry changes or in bringing mom home. And you can learn more or support us at the link in the show notes or in the comments if you're watching on Facebook. Have a great week, and don't forget to smile.